Welcome to Windows on the World. Now, the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia is a political party affiliated to the Lyndon LaRouche movement. Their website is cecaust.com.au. Recently, their petition on the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall was rejected by British Parliament. With 100,000 signatures, it could have gone on to a parliamentary debate. The Glass-Steagall Act separates commercial and investment banking, and it was in operation from 1933 to 1999. Several years after it was stopped, we had the big economic crash in 2008. We have featured the Citizens Council on their recent UK visit, and we are now joined by Glenn Isherwood on Skype.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me back on your show. So I'm from a political party here in Australia called the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia. We were founded in 1988, and in 1991 our organisation became associated 1992, working with Lyndon LaRouche and the LaRouche Political organisation in the United States. And that's important because any organisation that only looks at its domestic policies and doesn't look at the global direction of the economy is bound to be impotent. We can only solve the crises in the world, in our domestic economies, by looking at the world. And that's how we approach the current situation, the current global economic situation, and why we take such an interest in what happens over there in the United Kingdom as an Australian political body organisation. So many years ago, we launched a mobilisation for Glass-Steagall to be passed in the United States, Australia, the UK. Really, every single country should have a Glass-Steagall. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, what is that? Well, Glass-Steagall refers to a banking law that was passed in 1933 under Franklin Roosevelt, named after its sponsors, Carter Glass and Henry Steagall. And it came out of the Great Depression. You had the major Wall Street banks, who were, in that period, too big to fail, catastrophically collapsed, and it was discovered through what's called the Pecora Commission, just before Roosevelt was inaugurated, that all of these major banks were completely immoral. They were using their customers' money and clients' money to gamble and speculate. They were deceiving their own clients by selling them dodgy products. And in turn, people in the Great Depression, bankers on Wall Street who were, the untouchables of their day, they were thrown in jail for it. Now, what happened? Out of the Great Depression, Glass-Steagall was enacted, and it worked for 66 years, protecting the US economy from bank failure, systemic bank failure. Starting in the 1980s, under deregulation, what Margaret Thatcher did in the UK, what began to unravel in the United States, the banks lobbied the politicians to repeal and roll back the regulations and restrictions on banks. So what happened in 1999 was the final nail in the coffin. The Glass-Steagall law was repealed by Clinton and sponsored by the Wall Street banks and pushed by Alan Greenspan. And what that did is it allowed the merger of commercial bank and investment banks under law. It became legal. And that's really when a race to the bottom started, where the City of London and Wall Street got in this tit-for-tat race to be the biggest financial centre in the world. So banks became too big to fail. They leveraged up higher and higher. They went into more and more debt. The speculation and gambling in things called derivatives was legalised, which used to be an illegal, frowned upon practice. This stuff became legitimised in their eyes and in the eyes of the law, and that's what led to the GFC. So there's been incredible amount of debate in the UK, the US and Australia around making sure this doesn't happen again. But it's been misdirected because what happened was there was a very big push after the crash to return to a Glass-Steagall separation. many advocates in the US Congress, many advocates in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. In fact, the UK Parliament had one of the most robust discussions and debates about returning to a Glass-Steagall in 2012 in this period. What happened is it freaked out the City of London, and they had to come back with an alternative that was not Glass-Steagall, which was a fig leaf of banking reform. And what they came back with was what they call the ring fence. And that is not Glass-Steagall. The ring fence was like a Chinese wall between commercial banking and investment banking. So what we've done is, and many others have said, that the reforms that were made after the GFC, the so-called reforms, are a fig leaf. They're not going to work. The banks are going to get around them, and they have effectively done so. So now it's 2017. All the too big to fail banks are bigger than they were before the crash, making more profits than they were before the crash and during the crash. And they haven't changed their behaviour. The politicians have failed to reform them, and the ring fence has failed. It hasn't even taken effect. It's supposed to take effect in 2019. So in light of this, we launched a mobilisation several years ago to get the UK Parliament to adopt Glass-Steagall. It was championed over there by the late Michael Meacher, who was the MP for Labor, long-serving MP, unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, and with him died a great stalwart for Glass-Steagall. But the fight goes on, and what we put forward just 2 weeks ago, Mark, is a petition. Our friends and associates in the UK put up this petition for Glass-Steagall, and it, in turn, 2 weeks later got rejected. And if you like, I'll read that to you. The petition reads, "Pass Glass-Steagall banking separation now. The IMF, the BIS, and many financial experts are warning of a new global financial crash far worse than 2008, which will be caused by the same forces, the unbridled speculation in derivatives and outright criminal activity of the City of London and Wall Street megabanks. The USA's 1933 Glass-Steagall Act, which strictly separated deposit-taking commercial banks from investment banks engaged in speculation, protected the US economy for 66 years. On top of London's 1986 Big Bang deregulation, its repeal in 1999 led to the formation of the too big to fail banks. Restoring Glass-Steagall is non-partisan. 445 UK MPs and Lords from all parties voted for it in 2013. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump campaigned for it in the 2016 US election. Pass Glass-Steagall now." So, that petition was rejected by the UK Parliament. We got word of this early last week. And I'll just read you their response. Why was this petition rejected? And this is what they say in their words: "We're not sure what you would like the government or Parliament to do. The Financial Services Banking Reform Act 2013 requires banks to ring-fence the retail and investment arms of their businesses by 2019, meaning the action you have requested is already law." We would have expected a petition as straightforward and as clear as that to go through, but the argument that what we in effect are asking for of a separation of commercial investment banking is already law, for them to claim the ring fence is Glass-Steagall, given they have the full resources of the Parliament and the history and the Hansard reports, all the debates that took place there, they very well know that Glass-Steagall is not the ring fence. So what we said in a press release that we put out, which is available on our website, you can go there to read the full text of that, in our press release, we said that this is borderline fraud for them to claim that they didn't understand what we were asking for. Let's just be clear here, and I'll read you some quotes, Mark, of some of the quotations from members of the House of Lords during the debate that clearly sum this up. But the ring fence was a proposal put forward by John Vickers, who led the parliamentary inquiry into the financial crash and recommended ring fencing. It was already recognised by many members of the UK Parliament that it wouldn't work, that it was an experimental, never before tried idea to try and get a bank to regulate itself, to have a ring fence inside a bank, a Chinese wall inside a bank that said commercial and investment banking activities cannot be mixed with each other. Now, I'll just read you what the government said during this debate in 2013. Lord Dayton protested that, quote, Glass-Steagall is not a supplement to ring fencing. It is a separate alternative which would replace it. It is a game changer. Sir Peter Tapsell, who was the father of the House, now retired MP, when debating this issue said, quote, what I mean by a complete return to Glass-Steagall is that we should have none of this nonsense of ring fencing which used to be called Chinese walls. It never works. Chinese walls turned out to be paper mache. I worked in the city for 40 years and I promise members that it is impossible to make that work. And I could go on. There's some more of those types of quotes on our website and in our publications. One I'll just show to your viewers here. This is also available on our website. This publication called Glass-Steagall Now. I might have shown this in your last program actually, Mark. But this is a document that captures the essence of the debate, very briefly, of what happened in the UK Parliament. Because it was exciting. There was a real chance that the UK could have led the world on fixing up the banking system. It was very close there and quite surprising given that the City of London has so much control. That is why they are terrified of bringing this back up for debate in the UK Parliament. Well, when it comes to banking, there's not many new ideas. I think the last time you really saw genuine innovation and creativity in banking was in 1790 with Alexander Hamilton's reports in the US Congress. That was really when banking reached its high point in terms of a sensible and productive culture in the form of national banking. What the City of London represents is a 1,000-year-old institution of financial wealth and power that they hate the idea that a government or a sovereign democratic government of the people that represents the people would check their power and their wealth. The idea that you would have regulation to curb these gambling habits and addictions of these bankers is, to them, that's the greatest threat that they see. So when it comes to Glass-Steagall, the fact that it worked for 66 years and was so simple left no wriggle room for bankers to get away with the type of speculation and excesses that they have. And that is admitted. I mean, a lot of ex-City of London investment bankers, Lord Lawson's an example, I just mentioned Sir Peter Tapsell, they all recognise that they made a massive mistake by creating this too big to fail monster. And so across the board, whether you're a Labour Party and you're a dyed in the wool, red as they say, you're as left wing as they come, whether you're green, whether you're a conservative who believes in sensible markets, and even if you're a pro deregulation but you think some regulation is needed, there is so many people who believe that Glass-Steagall should come back that the City of London are afraid that this will get airtime. So they're just blocking it out. So there's a certain responsibility on every citizen to champion this and to really understand what the essence of the Glass-Steagall debate is. Because if we don't get a separation of banking and break up these two big to fail banks, we're just on a stopwatch clock to the next crash. Everyone admits it. Everyone's saying we haven't changed the system. Vickers, the guy who put up the idea of ring fencing, just came out admitting that the banks failed all their stress tests, that the reforms aren't happening quick enough, the banks are still in a very dangerous position. And coming to the question of what can be done, Mark, as you said, that's the essence of why we're talking about it. What can be done? Another one who said that not enough has been changed in the banking world is Andrew Thierry, who's the head of the Parliamentary Treasury Committee, and he actually right now is holding hearings. What is called? He's put up this thing called the Capital Inquiry, which is taking submissions in the UK Parliament now. It closes on the 5th of March, and it takes inquiries from anybody. So what I would say as a suggestion for every viewer watching this is educate yourself on Glass-Steagall if you don't already know it in the principle of separation, what it involves, and write to this inquiry. Send a message to Andrew Thierry's Capital Inquiry. You can find the details on the UK Parliament website. And as a citizen, as a UK citizen, demand that they consider Glass-Steagall, demand that they recognise that they dropped the ball and screwed up royally when it came to the ring fence. It's not going to work. Tell them these things, because I know Andrew Thierry didn't agree with the banking reform bill in its entirety. He wanted a Glass-Steagall power. Many of these people did, but they were muscled out by the City of London. So they need a people's movement, as we call it, a people's war against the City of London. So everyone should write to that inquiry, write to your MP, have a meeting, sit-down meeting, go to your next surgery, talk to your MP about the fact we're going to see another economic crash. We don't want to have to bail them out. We don't want to have another RBS situation. The answer is staring you in the face. It's a 35-page piece of legislation. It's called Glass-Steagall. Go and pass that and do it tomorrow, or do it yesterday.
Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm Mark Windows. Now, over the years, we've put out a lot of information. The Windows on the World show has run for several years now. We've exposed corruption, found solutions, and put out some very useful information on many subjects since we started doing this. This includes, of course, the bigger picture, along with well-researched history, science, and, of course, health matters, which we also cover. Now, our initial website was landofthefree.co.uk, and this was set up to fight the corporate courts, rogue bailiffs, and the unlawful actions of public officials. I and many others have successfully fought criminal bailiff companies and won in court against dishonest councils. This information is all still available. The journalistic integrity of Windows on the World is very important, and we tried to put out information that's forensically accurate and simplistic as possible. So we try and put everything out in a very easy way for people to understand, because over the years there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation, especially with where people stand within the law, and it's got a lot of people into trouble. So we've always stayed on the right side of the law, but being able to empower people to go into court and do the right thing, that's very important to us. Now, I put this information out to the public because I feel it needs to be there. And even within so-called alternative media, there is much information which is misleading and incorrect. In fact, all the things the now ridiculous mainstream media accuses the alternative media of, there are people putting out stuff that's very, very unhelpful, and we try not to do that. So we accept no funding from anybody and are completely independent. And it's now increasingly necessary that we get some help to fund what we're doing. We're looking for sponsors from self-employed small business sector, which, as we know, is being destroyed, and we cover this a lot on the show with the plans for regeneration, the soaring business rates, and a destruction of what we used to know as our environment, because we're finding that people now are being pushed out and socially engineered from the places that they need to be. We'd also like to appeal to individuals who might be able to donate. Now, the donate button on the site, you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it's also on every article and every video on the site, on windowsontheworld.net. Now, I've never asked for any donations before, but things are getting a bit tighter for us and we want to carry on and expand what we're doing. That's the most important thing, to expand what we're doing and be able to bring you much more information, which is very difficult at the moment because there's just a few of us. So, the bottom line is, if you can spare a few quid and enjoy what we're doing, press the donate button, we'll be very grateful. And if there's anybody out there, small businesses, who benefit from the sort of information that we put out, and we know there's quite a few because we've been contacted by them, if you'd like to make a small contribution or help out in any way, we'd be most grateful. That's the end of that, and we'll see you soon on Windows on the World.